I think it was around noon, you know, the president's been shot. And in those days, no one had televisions in their rooms. There was a television in the lobby of the dormitory, and we went there and we watched, you know, the coverage. And in fairly short order, we learned that he'd been killed. And then I remember, you know, just sort of a stunned student body, and people started to kind of go home. Even, you know, we were about to go on Thanksgiving break, and I think people went home early that weekend. And then the funeral was the following Monday. So at that point, the entire nation was sort of glued to the television set watching the funeral.
At the time, I was working at Sterling Faucet, and I worked third shift. So I would come home in the morning, get the kids off to school, get a shower, go to bed. And I would probably sleep till about 11 o'clock and then get up and do whatever I had to do for the day. And I went to sleep with the radio on, listening to the news. And I woke up and I could tell something had happened just by the things that the broadcasters were saying. And I thought, someone's been killed. And then I'm trying to think, who is it? Who is it? And so many times, I'm sure you're familiar with this. If you turn the radio on and they've already given the headline, and maybe they go forever without coming back to the main topic, and there I was frantically turning the dial, trying to figure out what are they talking about. And at one point I was able to reach a station that repeated that the president had been assassinated. I was home alone, and I guess I just went to pieces. But I was in bed. And as I then got up and started some things that I had to do that day, I needed to go in town. So I walked through South Park, and everyone that I would meet, it's like individuals that you didn't even know. Everyone was crying and just looking at you saying, I can't believe it. And it just seemed like we were all walking around like zombies. And when I got downtown, there was very few cars. Stores were closing. And I'm sure it was probably payday and I needed to go to the bank. And the conversation that maybe you would have in the stores or at the bank, everybody was just too filled up to even talk. They were just polite. You did what you had to do and move on. And in my mind, I just believe that that happened on a Friday, because I remember we didn't work nights, Friday nights at Sterling, but you went back on a Sunday. And then the rumor started that they were going to shut down for a couple of days. At our house, it was like you were glued to the TV, and even for the kids, it was like run to the kitchen and find something to eat, the quickest thing you could, and get back to the TV. So we were just glued. And I often thought that there'd be some investigation, and they would find out that somebody else was involved.
I was coming from one class, going to another, and I came out onto Woodburn Circle. And of course, no cell phones in those days, no Facebook, none of that. So word kind of filtered. And I heard somebody talking, a couple of people talking about what had happened, and I wasn't sure for a while exactly what it was that had happened. And then when I began to compute what I was hearing and talked with several others, walked toward the lair where the plaza was just kind of filling up with people, people walked out of their offices. People, I think, left classes and just kind of gathered at the lair. And I think we all felt kind of the same thing. this can't be. Somebody's made a mistake, or at least I felt that way. But I think a lot of other people did too. People were crying, as you can expect. People were just standing, kind of staring. But then as, the day went on and news organizations began to play and replay what had happened, it sank in. And when it did, for me, it was a realization that things had changed in a fundamental and deep way. And that's what we had to begin to live with. But it took a long time to get adjusted to that. It was the end of Camelot. It was kind of like McLean's song, I drove my Chevy to the levee and the levee was dry. Apple pie, American pie had gone. And we found ourselves kind of at loose ends, not knowing which way to turn, not knowing what to do about what we were feeling, and just having to face that as our future. It was truly devastating, personally, and I think as a country.
I remember that I was in my office, and one of our local attorneys came flying in and said he heard that John Kennedy had been shot. He did not say that he was deceased, but I turned on the radio. That's all we could do. We didn't even have much television then, but we just followed it. Everything that happened. At first you hope, well, he may have been shot, maybe it's not fatal, but it certainly was.
I was actually at a friend of mine's house on my way to school. I was at his house. We were just about ready to leave, and his mom said, "Oh my God, they've shot the president." And we really didn't know what it meant at the time. We really didn't know that he had died at the time. But they told us to go ahead and go to school. We went to school, and then while we were in school, then they made an announcement saying the president had passed.
We lived at Worthington, Ohio at that time, and I had gone to do some shopping, and I was in Lazarus department store, the large, really large Lazarus department store. And when I went in, I was in the store, I saw bookstore. Whenever there's a bookstore, I can't stay away from it. I have to go in the bookstore. See what, even though I wasn't planning on any certain books, but I was looking. And then when I was in the bookstore, I heard something going on, like maybe someone yelling, or couldn't know exactly. And I went out further, and they were talking on a not television, but it was the radio at that time. And they were saying that Kennedy was shot. And I said, "Oh, is he all right?" And they said, "No, he was killed." And I couldn't believe it. I said, "No." And I had only been there just to the store, just, not even, maybe a half hour. And I was getting to do some shopping, but I couldn't even think of doing anything. And I thought, well, maybe that's not true. It didn't happen. I mean, maybe he's still okay. They're going to take care of him. And then I decided, took a cab to go back home to Worthington. And I had a woman there doing some cleaning for me. And she hadn't even turned on a radio or anything. She didn't know anything about it. When I told her, she was shocked, too. She had to sit down, and we both were kind of had, crying, whatever it came to us, and turned on the television and watched it. And when I told the lady, I said, you don't have to stay. And I wanted her to stay a little, in case my sons got home from school early, and if I didn't get back. from shopping, she'd still be there. But anyway, I usually don't stay that long to shop anyway. But she said yes, she wanted to rest a while, then she'd go home, and it was so horrible.
I was in college. I was a sophomore, and I was on a and I was taking geology when I was on a geological field trip. And I can't remember what the hell we were looking for, but some damn rock. But the whole subject was not particularly appealing to me. So we were searching around for rocks. I was out in this field with 2 other people, and someone who came late. His name was Andy Van Benscoten. And he just walked up to me and said, I mean, there was no preparation or no leading up to it or anything, just Kennedy has been assassinated. And I found myself 5 minutes later I guess I just simply started wandering. And I didn't know where I was going, and finally, 5 minutes later, realized I wasn't around anybody else, and turned around and came back to where the 2 or 3 other people were. Then, of course, we just ended everything and started walking up this hill back to the campus. And seeing people driving by in cars as we were walking up the hill, and you could just see by the expressions that something awful had happened. And you saw those faces behind the wheel.
I was in the 8th grade at Buckeye Junior High School, if you can believe it, in Columbus, Ohio. And I remember it perfectly well. I was working on the yearbook. I was part of the yearbook staff when we were just off the office. And someone made an announcement on the PA system that the president had been shot. And then not much longer, they made the announcement that he had died. And at that time, my father was an Ohio National Guard officer. He was a captain. I'd spent a lot of time in armory, so I probably knew more about the Army and Army protocol than anybody in the room. So I remember I went into the office and I said to someone, we're supposed to lower the flag. So somebody, I don't recall who, told me to go find the custodian and do it. So I did. I went and found the custodian. He and I went outside, and this man and I lowered the flag.